Now let's look at specific statements from Russian officials because the pattern and escalation are revealing. Andrei Kartopolov, who chairs the Russian State Duma Defense Committee, one of the most powerful positions in Russian government overseeing military affairs, stated publicly in May 2025 that Ukraine risks losing not just Donbass, but also Zaporizhzhia, Dnipro, Sumy, Kharkiv, Odessa, and Mykolaiv if it refuses to engage in peace talks on Russian terms soon. Let me emphasize what he's saying. He's not talking about Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts, which Russia already largely controls. He's talking about capturing Zaporizhzhia, a major industrial city that Russia partially surrounds. He's talking about Dnipro, Ukraine's fourth largest city, a major population and industrial center. He's talking about Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. And he's explicitly including Odessa and Mykolaiv, Ukraine's entire Black Sea coastline. This is a senior Russian military official articulating objectives to seize half of Ukraine, including all economically vital regions, all major cities, all access to the sea. This isn't an offhand comment. This is a deliberate statement of strategic intent. Then we have Pevtsov's December statement about resolving the war militarily to reclaim ancestral lands in Odessa. But he's not alone. Multiple Russian officials, media personalities, and military analysts have made similar statements throughout 2025. The consistency is important. When you see one official make an extreme statement, you might dismiss it as individual zealotry. When you see systematic repetition of the same themes across multiple officials, across state media, across supposedly independent analysts, you're looking at coordinated narrative preparation. Russia is conditioning its population to accept and support a major military campaign to seize Odessa. They're building the psychological foundation. They're establishing the historical and moral justification in advance. This is exactly what Russia did before invading Crimea in 2014. They spent years talking about Crimea as Russian land, about Russian people suffering under Ukrainian rule, about historical injustice. Then when they invaded, the Russian population was already primed to support it. The same pattern is repeating with Odessa. Second major category of evidence, Ukrainian military intelligence has obtained actual Russian military planning documents that explicitly outline operational objectives, including the seizure of Odessa with specific timelines. In June 2025, Colonel Pavlo Palisa, deputy head of the Ukrainian presidential office, publicly revealed details of these plans in an interview. Now, revealing captured enemy planning documents is unusual. It's typically kept classified. The fact that Ukrainian officials felt compelled to make this public tells you how seriously they take the threat and how frustrated they are that Western partners aren't responding appropriately. According to these documents, which Ukrainian intelligence assessed as genuine operational planning from Russian general staff, Russia has phased objectives. Phase 1, complete occupation of Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast by September 2025. They're approximately on track for this. Most of both regions are already under Russian control, and Russian forces continue making steady progress toward capturing remaining Ukrainian-held areas. Phase 2, establish buffer zones along the northern Ukrainian-Russian border by the end of 2025. This would involve seizing additional Ukrainian territory in Sumy, Chernihiv, and Kharkiv oblasts to create defensive depth, protecting Russian territory from Ukrainian strikes. Russian forces have been actively operating in these directions throughout 2025. Phase 3, and this is the critical element, occupy all Ukrainian territory on the east bank of the Dnipro River and seize Odessa and Mykolaiv regions by the end of 2026, thereby completely depriving Ukraine of access to the Black Sea. Now, are these plans achievable? That's a separate analytical question that depends on force ratios, Ukrainian defensive capabilities, Western support levels, and numerous tactical and operational variables. But the fact that Russian general staff is planning for it, that they have specific timelines, that they're allocating forces and resources toward creating conditions to execute it, that tells you this is genuine strategic intent, not propaganda. Military staffs don't produce detailed operational plans with phased objectives and resource allocations for things they don't intend to attempt. These plans exist because Russia seriously intends to pursue these objectives if conditions permit. and everything Russia has done militarily and politically throughout 2025 can be understood as setting conditions for executing these plans. Third category of evidence, and this one is irrefutable because it's observable. Russia has been conducting systematic sustained attacks on Odessa's port infrastructure, energy systems, and economic assets for years, dramatically intensifying throughout 2025. These aren't random strikes as part of general campaign against Ukraine. These are specifically targeted operations designed to degrade Odessa's value and capability. Let me walk through the pattern. Russian forces have struck Odessa port facilities with missiles, drones, and naval bombardment literally hundreds of times since 2022. Major attacks occurred in July 2023, continuing through 2024 and intensifying in 2025. In July 2025, Russian ballistic missile strikes on Odessa port infrastructure killed multiple people, including port workers, and caused extensive damage to loading facilities, grain silos, and maritime infrastructure. These were precision strikes using expensive Iskander missiles, indicating high-value targets. In August 2025, Russian attacks sparked major fires at Odessa port facilities, destroying warehouses and damaging ships docked at the port. In October 2025, Russian missile and drone strikes specifically targeted electrical infrastructure supporting Odessa and the surrounding region, causing widespread power outages that affected port operations. In November 2025, a massive Russian drone attack involving over 100 drones targeted Odessa region, hitting energy facilities, port infrastructure, and several civilian vessels. The pattern is unmistakable. Russia is systematically degrading Odessa's capability to function as a port. They're destroying infrastructure. They're making it economically unviable. They're demonstrating to Ukraine that Odessa cannot be protected. And they're setting conditions for eventual assault by reducing the value of what they'd be seizing. A damaged port with degraded infrastructure is easier to justify attacking than a fully functional economic asset. Fourth, Russia's economic warfare, specifically targeting Odessa through withdrawal from the grain deal and blockade of Ukrainian exports. The UN-backed grain deal, brokered by Turkey and the United Nations, allowed Ukrainian grain to be exported through Black Sea ports, including Odessa, despite the ongoing war. This was economically vital for Ukraine and for global food security. Russia participated initially but withdrew in July 2023, specifically to put economic pressure on Ukraine through Odessa. Immediately after withdrawing, Russia intensified attacks on vessels attempting to enter or leave Odessa port, attacked port facilities, and declared large areas of the northwestern Black Sea to be military danger zones where civilian shipping operated at extreme risk. The message was clear. Ukrainian grain exports through Odessa exist only at Russian sufferance and can be choked off whenever Russia chooses. This is economic siege warfare using Odessa as the pressure point. Every attack on port infrastructure, every vessel threatened or struck, every disruption to export operations weakens Ukraine economically and creates political pressure on Ukrainian government. Russia is using this systematically to create conditions where Ukraine becomes increasingly desperate, where the cost of continuing the war becomes unbearable, where accepting Russian peace terms that include surrendering territory becomes the least bad option. Now, let me explain in comprehensive detail why Odessa matters so profoundly strategically, why Russia is willing to invest enormous military and political resources into seizing it, because understanding what Russia gains from controlling Odessa is absolutely essential to understanding the entire trajectory of this war and Russia's ultimate objectives. Odessa isn't just another city. It's not even just another major city. Odessa is the critical node in Ukraine's economic survival and long-term viability as an independent state. Before the war, Odessa handled approximately 60% of Ukraine's maritime trade. 60%. The port moved grain exports, metal exports, manufactured goods, essentially everything Ukraine produces that needs to reach global markets. Import side, Odessa brought in machinery, consumer goods, petroleum products when needed, everything Ukraine requires but doesn't produce domestically. Economically, Ukraine is dependent on maritime trade. It's a large agricultural producer, one of the world's major grain exporters. It's a significant metals producer, but it's landlocked except for the Black Sea coast. If Russia controls Odessa, if Russia controls Mykolaiv, which is the other significant port, Ukraine becomes completely landlocked. All remaining Ukrainian trade would have to transit land borders through Poland, Romania, Slovakia, Hungary, Moldova. Those countries have limited port capacity to handle Ukrainian volume. Even if they wanted to, rail capacity is constrained, trucking faces capacity limits, and massive cost increases compared to maritime shipping.